Good day, everybody. My name is Peter Matzer. I'm the Speakers Chair for the Association of Corporate Treasurers, and it's my pleasure to welcome you to today's first live stream session, Thursday, the 14th of May, on the final day of the ACT's International Treasury Week. We've had a tremendous week with thousands of people from more than 80 countries around the world participating in the live stream sessions and also enjoying the pre-recorded sessions that have been broadcast during the week. A couple of reminders for you that might be helpful. There are plenty more sessions today, including we're going to be hearing from the former Governor of the Bank of England, Mark Carney, talking about environment and sustainability issues, particularly in the finance arena. In addition to that, of course, during the week, we have heard from panels and pre-recorded discussions on subjects as diverse as LIBOR, as some of the technology issues confronting treasurers, some of the strategic issues confronting treasurers, not forgetting the launch of the ACT's research, The Business of Treasury 2020, which is now available also on the ACT website for you to download. I should also add that for all those of you who are registered, clearly you are if you are listening in at the moment, you will be able to listen to any or all of the sessions that have been broadcast during the week from this evening, and no doubt you will be getting your email from the ACT to remind you of that issue. My pleasure today, however, this morning, to introduce and moderate a session on building business resilience. It's an interesting topic that we have touched upon in some of the sessions this week, but we're going to take a slightly different focus at the moment. We're going to be talking to two treasurers about how their organizations have responded to the crisis, and to an experienced technology professional who's going to talk both about his experience over previous crises, for example, the financial crisis 2008, and before that too, and what lessons we might be able to learn from that, and how as treasurers we might be able to help our organizations develop their business resilience, both through our own professional skills, but also through using and adapting some of the fine technology that is available to us. I won't introduce each speaker. You can look them up on the app in the speaker section of the app. And I would also remind you on the app, you can provide us with feedback and also Q&A as the session progresses. And in addition, we will be doing two live polls a little bit later on, and I'd very much welcome your participation in those as well. I'm going to lead off today's session by asking both of our corporate treasurers on the panel to talk both a little bit about themselves and their experience, but also to talk about how they have seen their businesses react to the COVID-19 pandemic crisis, and how they see resilience as part of their organizational practice. I'm first of all going to ask Katherine Horrell, who's the new group treasurer at the AA, to talk about her organization. Katherine.
Yeah, so I'm, as Peter says, group treasurer with the AA. Previously been in a little stint in public transport with Arriva, and before that with Centrica for 10 years. So got a bit of treasury experience in different industries and companies. I've been with the AA for precisely 1 month. Today is my 1 month anniversary, which means I've joined the company and interviewed and started with no physical meetings with anyone that I work with or work for, which has been interesting. And also at the time when the company's been responding to all the changes that we've all been responding to. So in the AA, that's been, the roadside business has obviously been very dramatically affected in different ways. So demand on the breakdown services has gone down dramatically. The company's had to put a call center of about 1,000 people back out to working from home, which they did in the space of about 2 weeks, with call center workers taking desktop computers home because there weren't enough laptops, and amazing effort that's gone in there to make it all work. The AA has been offering free breakdown and assistance to both the NHS and NHS workers during this period. And as the lockdown is lifting, we're obviously, still working out what that means, but lots of people are starting to drive cars that have been sat idle on their driveways for quite a long time, and driving quite a big increase in breakdown. So I mean, there's also quite a big insurance business that is reasonably stable, but lots of response, both in terms of the customer service offering and the technology and remote working, and being able to respond quickly to changes in business demand and business operations. It's made it a really interesting time to join a really interesting company for me.
Although your organisation experience at the AA is relatively new, clearly you've got a depth of experience as a corporate treasurer anyway. Are any of the things that you've seen or heard ones that have particularly surprised you, or have thought that's something perhaps I never thought organisations could do or should do? Do you see any, in the short term, you've got experience of the AA, any particular immediate lessons that you would draw?
Yeah, so I mean, there's probably a couple. In the sort of broadest, more general sense, it is amazing to see how people respond when needs must, and the company has been very good at that, and I'm sure lots of people have found companies responding and changing very quickly to these challenges. On a personal point of view, actually, I've been really gratified that I didn't quite know what it was going to be like meeting new colleagues remotely, but it seems to have worked pretty well, I think, and I've met a really great group of people in the finance function in AA who've been super supportive and been able to kind of get stuck in straight away, and that's been really heartening, because you don't quite know when you start making suggestions or questioning how things are working what response you'll get, and sometimes you'd really rather be in a room with people to gauge their responses, but actually it's worked really well, and I'm really pleased at how it's going.
And more particularly in sort of the finance and treasury arena, where you have more direct responsibilities, obviously, are there any specific things in that area, just as some initial thoughts that have grabbed you, or if we ever had to do this again, that you would think that's my port of call to start with?
Yeah, I mean, it's interesting. There's a really good team in the AA sort of managing operational banking. They actually haven't had a group treasurer as such for quite a few years. So some of these activities are a little bit dispersed around the company. Now, I wouldn't describe it. They're a great team, but I wouldn't describe it as the most technologically advanced cash management operation in the world, and I don't think they would be too upset for me to say that. So there's, but it's relatively straightforward. It's a UK only, UK and Ireland business, so it doesn't have the international complexity to it. So it works that they rely a lot on spreadsheets and links to one or two banks, but it's not. It's probably not best in class, shall we say, at the moment.
Right. We'll come back to one of those points. So thank you very much in the short term. Agnes, I wonder if you might introduce yourself now and your current position and experience, and perhaps go down one or two of those lines that Katherine has introduced in terms of how you've seen your organisation's resilience.
Absolutely. Morning, everyone. I hope everyone is well and safe. So I'm Agnès Favillier. I am Treasury Director at Sage, and I'm also President of the ACT for this year. So I've been at Sage for, I think, 9 months now, so I'm relatively new, but I know the company quite well now, and I've seen it working, obviously, in normal times and since the last couple of months, and how we've reacted to the COVID crisis. And I always think so the impact of the crisis has been kind of broadly twofold for us. There's the impact it's had on colleagues and how we work. And then obviously the impact that it's had on our business. Obviously our business is to sell payroll and accounting software. So it's really the impact on our business is the impact on our customers. On the first point around colleagues, it's actually, we were, from where I sit anyway, we were very well equipped to work remotely beforehand, and that was kind of a common practice anyway for us to work from home. We've got shared service centers that are on different continents and different areas, and we're very well connected. Obviously, we're also very well connected to all our businesses that are operating in the different countries we're in. So for us, working remotely and virtually has always been normal practice. The only thing that changes is that obviously now we do it every day rather than the odd day in the week. But in terms of equipment and ways of working, I haven't noticed such a dramatic change, and I don't think it's been a challenge for us as a company. So that's good. In terms of the impact that it's had on our business, we actually announced our H1 results yesterday, so it makes my job a little easier to kind of tell you about that. Obviously, our H1 goes to the end of March, so there's only a small portion of the COVID-19 crisis that's included in that, but we already have a flavour as to how we're impacted. And I think, Sage as a company, we've got quite a well diversified customer base, and we've got a wide range of products. So that helps the business being quite resilient because of this diversification. That being said, there's clear signs that our customers have been impacted by the general economic downturn, and that shows it in two different ways. So we see, first of all, customers aren't ready to invest in new software, and so they will delay software purchase decisions. And the other one is unfortunately, there's a higher rate of business failures. And obviously, then for us, that means less revenue from the businesses that go under. So, all of that to say, obviously, we will see a slowdown in our growth forecast for the year. We don't really know what it's going to be yet because of the general uncertainty, but we know there'll be an impact on growth and on margin. It's been quite interesting actually to see what we've done as a business to support our customers, and there's a lot of effort that has gone into that. And as Katherine, I think one of the main things we've done is to have better customer services so that our customers can reach us easier and we can discuss their issues with them directly and understand their needs. And then we've also looked at supporting our customers through understanding what type of government schemes they can apply for, and innovated some of the kind of software modules that we have to help them actually make these applications. So I think that's quite an interesting angle of how we've supported our customers through that. So that's that in a nutshell.
I'll come back to a couple of those issues a little later on, and forgive me, perhaps I should have introduced you as Madam President. I'm probably being I'm probably going to black mark for that.
I'm not wearing my medal.
Indeed. I'd like to queue up the first poll now, if I may, and I'd like to ask everybody to open their apps and address themselves to the first poll. Please excuse my hands on the screen. It's my only way of scrolling through that I have with the kit that I have. But the questions will be, post C-19 crisis, will treasurers rely more on their professional skills than technology, have to balance their professional skills and technology, or have to increase their tech capability over their professional skills? So maybe if I could ask the audience to answer that question, we can come back to that in a moment. In the meantime, I want to introduce a very good friend of the ACT and of mine for a considerable number of years, probably too many more than we'd like to remember, Bill Rest. Bill, maybe if you just take a few moments to introduce yourself, and then maybe we'll have an opportunity perhaps to look at the answers on the poll, and then get into some of these issues of Treasury technology and resilience.
Yes, I will. Thanks, Peter, and good morning, everybody. My name is Bill Rest. I work for Gresham Technology. I'm the Senior Strategist for Cash Management Solutions there. My background, I was many, many years in Bank of America, selling global Treasury solutions, cash management solutions, and in fact, Treasury systems to corporates and financial institutions. I then spent a number of years in Barclays Corporate Bank as Head of Innovation, within that corporate bank side of things. These days, I find myself on the dark side or the light side, depending on your perspective. But mainly I spend my time talking to banks and corporate and financial institutions about what I perceive to be best practice and the addressable gaps, perhaps, in what they have at the moment. From a Gresham perspective, we were one of the first, if not the first, to work remotely from home, probably testing it before anybody else did. Our ability, as you would expect with a seasoned fintech, there's been no detrimental effect to our clients. We can support them from a customer service perspective as well as we were doing before. So the working from home piece for us in that sense hasn't affected us. From a sales and marketing point of view, I think the important thing for us is we don't want to come out of this at the end and find that people say, where were you? So certainly my role very much involves us being at the forefront in terms of presentations like this. I've been very vocal or literate in articles about some of the challenges that everybody faces at the moment.
Mm. Just specifically on that point, before we get to the poll, would your experience and market knowledge suggest to you that most of your peer group has been able to respond and adapt in a broadly similar way?
You're trying to get me into trouble.
You don't have to name names.
I would say that, first of all, that's difficult to tell without actually physically looking at each one of them. But I, from what I can judge and from what people are telling me, I would say no to that. Not everybody is probably as well positioned as we are like that. I also think that, to my latter part about trying to make sure that you're front face with your clients and with your prospects, that's produced an absolute myriad of different approaches and ways across social media, some good, some not so good. I think we're all learning what the new norm is, if I mean, that's overused, but you know, we are learning like that. But certainly, I mean, I was just watching something on the broadband service that we all rely on so much right now, you know, and the disparity between the various services. So people are having to come to terms with a change in how they support their clients, for sure.
Right. I'll come back to one or two issues later on, because I want to draw some lessons out of that for how Treasury should approach some of their technology relationships and management going forward. Let's just have a quick look at the poll. We got answers. It's been bouncing around a little bit. It's around about just under 20% think treasurers will rely more on their professional skills and technology. Around about 60% they'll have to balance them. I don't know whether that suggests they think they are balanced or they're going to have to move towards a balance. And the other 20% or so suggesting that they're going to have to really weight or improve their tech capability. How do you see that as an answer from the clients that you have and that you've known in the Treasury industry?
You're asking me, Peter?
Yes, sorry, Bill, yes.
Yeah, that's fine. So that's quite interesting. I think that what this crisis has done is in many instances, it has pushed Treasury from being largely operational and functional for the company to being very strategic and the buffer between all of the market conditions that can happen even as we're speaking. I mean, it's so spontaneous. So the role of Treasury has become forefront as the buffer and the financial buffer between what's happening in the marketplace and what's happening in the company. Resilience, which was talked about earlier, can mean a whole host of things to me. It can mean operational resilience, financial resilience, technical resilience. I'm clearly going to come at it from the perspective that, whilst admiring the Treasurer's skill and understanding, particularly as I've said, they're strategic, they will need that more and more during this crisis. But the underlying technology shouldn't impact or deter from that. In fact, it should absolutely underpin it and augment it. And that's very much the role that we at Gresham have at the moment, where we're going, or I'm going out to a lot of companies and saying, it's not okay to hunker down. with the solution you've got currently? Because, you know, if we have suddenly been projected into a digital age, and, you know, a Zoom call doesn't make us digital, but you look at what was the solution and you look at the addressable gaps, and then you say, well, can I see all my liquidity? Can I see all my bank accounts? Do I have file format dependencies? Have I got multiple systems? You know, the end is listless like that, but is it perfection, or is it even optimal in the current climate? So I would say no.
I'll come back to that thought in a minute. Katherine and Agnes, I want to come back to you. Agnes, first of all, I'm not going to be quite so bold as to claim that Sage is a fintech operation, but let's go with that thought just in a moment. Are you seeing, when your clients are coming to you and saying, can we adapt this and can we adapt that? Are you seeing, or does the business see that as a need to rethink what it's doing for its clients, or is it just trying to be adaptive and flexible? I'm really trying to get at this heart of sort of resilience, efficiency, productivity issue, and I know you've got some thoughts on that.
Yeah, so I think as a company, and that doesn't have anything to do with the crisis, as a company, we're on a big transition actually to go from what used to be, or how we used to sell software, which is install software on companies' premises. You do that, they don't have to ever upgrade, they can just sit on that, it's a one-off purchase. So we're moving away from that model to a subscription model and to cloud-based products. And that is the transition we're on as a business, and that's been going on for a couple of years, and that will carry on for another few years. So I think, you know, when you think of resilience and what companies are and our customers are expecting from us, it is being on the cloud, it is being accessible from anywhere, and we are doing that. And coming with that is all of the connectivity capabilities that are enabled just from being on the cloud, really. So when you think of banking connectivities and stuff like that, and AI and all this other kind of stuff, it's all products that we're investing in, either organically or we're buying different businesses that deliver these things to kind of plug into our own systems. So you know, BAU for Sage is that in any case. With the crisis, I think I'm not very close to because there's so much going on the Treasury side. I don't really have time to go and speak to the commercial teams. But certainly we have definitely feedback on banking connectivity and on product capabilities, and we will act on those. But that feeds into our normal kind of innovation pipeline, as you know, in a way.
Turn that back on yourself, though. You're sitting there as corporate treasurer. You're a user as a treasurer of financial services, financial technology as well. What role do you see that going forward in terms of responding there to the poll? Where do you see yourself in the poll? Do you think your professional skills are more important? Are you going to try and be more balanced, or do you really need to up the tech capability? Perhaps you might even want to talk about where you see the Treasury profession as much as yourself as well.
Yeah, absolutely. I think I'm probably in the same, which is quite ironic for a tech company, but I'm in the same situation as Catherine's, and in terms of levels of technology, sophistication that we have in our function. So we've got quite a lot of ways to improve how we work and how efficient and effective we are as a Treasury function. So we've got lots of work to do on the Treasury system side, on our cash and banking infrastructure, etc. So I think obviously for us, investing in tech and in other things, so cash and banking and all of that, is going to be critical for us to work better, because we're not starting from a great place. That being said, you know, in this current environment, Sage has been impacted, as I said earlier, but not as badly as other corporates. But we are looking at our cost base, obviously, as many companies will do, to try and manage our costs really going into our second or the rest of this year. And So it's easy to say, well, we need better technology, but actually, if the money to invest in better technology isn't there because we're managing costs at a business level, then there's very, my hands are tied. And then suddenly the competition for budget will become much more steep. So you can't just rely on saying, well, we need better tech, because actually you can only get that if you're competing against other areas in your business to get budget. And to be able to do that, you need leadership skills, you need communication skills, negotiation skills, etc. And you need to be able to articulate to your CFO or your board why you need to make this investment. And I think Treasury is always a bit of an uphill battle, because most of the time we're a cost center for the company. So justifying investment is always a bit of a challenge. I think it will be more challenging now because the resources get slightly constrained for a few years.
Yeah, well, I'll come back to one or two of those points. They're quite interesting, and I'm not going to ask Bill the next question, but I can hear him speaking already. Katherine, just to pick up on that, those comments from Agnes, your views on how you saw those poll outcomes. Just to remind you, around about 20% thought they would rely more on their professional skills over technology. About 60% balanced. About 20% needing to increase their technical capability. Picking up on Agnes's point there, how do you think as a treasurer you're going to go forward and push the need for technology advance within your treasury and finance function?
Yeah, so I mean, lots of interesting points to pick up from what Agnes has said. And I would say that I think my response when you read the question out on the poll was, I bet the answer to that is both. That treasurers are finding they need to, use some of their professional capabilities and knowledge that they might not have had to focus on before. So there'll be treasurers out there who are dealing with potential covenant breaches, consent solicitations on bonds, or new forms of financing. There might be people who are moving from investment grade into high yield and having to think in ways that they haven't before about their financing. So there'll be people very focused on that, and there will be people very focused on their day-to-day cash flow or forecasts or position or whatever it is. And find that they need to, that they wish they'd invested. What Agnes has said really resonates with me about getting the right budget within your company to be able to invest in systems. And I suppose I mean, it's not a helpful comment to say, oh, well, we really should have done this already, is it? But I'm sure there'll be plenty of people thinking that in the current environment. And I mean, my experience within Centrica was quite interesting, because Centrica went on a pretty aggressive cost cutting strategy for quite a period, particularly in the last few years that I was with the company there. And we did take the opportunity in Treasury to look very seriously at the technology that we had in place, particularly around cash management, with a view to making things more efficient. And it was definitely helpful in that situation to be early in the queue, because as the company looked more at cost cutting opportunities, there were a lot of business areas looking at changing the technology that they were using, and it was helpful to be early in that queue, if you like, and helpful that we thought about it early on. So I think I think it can be, and this probably opens up an opportunity for Bill to pick up the conversation. I mean, it can be, when you look at a big technological change, it can be quite daunting to think about, well, I know what I'm doing, downloading from this system and playing with my spreadsheets, and I've got it set up in a way that I understand, and it works. And it can be quite daunting to go through that process of making things more automatic. But I think you have to, the longer you leave it, the more you regret leaving it, really. And when there are opportunities to do things, and hopefully, you know, with the focus that Treasury is getting from senior management in a lot of businesses that haven't really perhaps had to think about it so carefully before, perhaps now is the opportunity to get ahead of the queue in some of that technology investment.
Does that suggest to you, though, and I'm thinking here of treasurers and even sort of non-treasurers per se, but people in businesses who are responsible for some of these issues, that they need to have a better understanding of how their organizations work before they go down the technology road? It's a cart and horse question, really. Sorry, I shouldn't use that in case people don't understand that. Which of those comes first for you? Do I need to understand more about my business, or do I just go out and buy some technology and try and shoehorn everything into it?
Yeah, I mean, you sort of you perhaps don't want to be at either end of the spectrum, but I would say, I mean, if you wait until, you know, you can wait until you understand every aspect of what's going on in your business. You know, that may never happen, because businesses, they make new acquisitions and change arrangements, and if you're in many countries, you might find that local management have control over some things, and they're doing things without you knowing. I think in today's current world of, you know, the way technology develops and systems develop, you have to be prepared to go at it fairly iteratively, really, to look for, you know, to look for your big wins and get them going quickly, and then gradually to build in, you know, to find those little corners of cash or liquidity that you know have been separated, and gradually pull them into your system. If you wait until, you know, I mean, if you wait until you've got the master spreadsheet of all the bank accounts that you've got in the company to be complete and accurate, you may never get there, and you'll be no further forward in your technology journey.
Okay, thank you very much. Okay, Bill, a number of issues and threads of conversation there. So what I'd be interested in hearing from you for a few minutes is, what advice, what tips, what structure should treasurers be thinking about for the relationship between how they run their treasury and how they manage and use and invest in their technology?
Okay, thanks, Peter. Katherine made some really interesting points there that resonated with me. Getting everything onto a spreadsheet is all well and good, but also if you're missing, and she drew mention to it, you're missing pockets of liquidity, or the flip side of that being pockets of risk, etc. The number of times that I talk to a major institution who may well have an enterprise accounting system, a treasury management system, etc., and have what we've all just been describing as broadly as the tech, they still have the issue that, what is it, just gone 10:30? Press a button and show me my global position and the risk that I have within the company. I mean, we're going through unprecedented economic times. There'll be a worldwide recession probably on the back of all of this. We saw I was in the middle of the banking crisis, which from that point of view, again, you were looking at things happening instantly. It draws a point to whether the existing structure you have will be robust enough to be able to have a proactive rather than a reactive treasury in terms of what may well happen, you know, even as we're talking. So, and also going back to the tech, I don't think to get to best practice these days, the way technology is developing, that it involves huge pots of budget to be able to do it. There's enough technology, and we believe this strongly at Gresham, to be able to look at the addressable gaps in what a treasurer has, be it liquidity, connectivity, etc. And part of the reason why those gaps exist, it's not necessarily down to the budget or the treasurer's skill set. It's largely historic, where, you know, when I was in Bank of America selling global cash management, I'd go along and talk to somebody about their cash management project, and they'd say, yeah, we're going to do the cash. But first, we're going to put an enterprise accounting system in place worldwide. And then we're going to put a TMS in place, hopefully worldwide, or at least as much as we can. And we're going to connect that to up as many of the banks as we can, and hopefully all the accounts, but it probably won't be. And then we'll look at the cash management and the liquidity and the risk and the exposure for the company and its working capital. And to me, that's completely the wrong way around, which is why we find ourselves in this crisis hunkered down and looking at the Treasury solution and going, well, it kind of works and it does work, but is it fit for purpose going forward? And would it concern me? And all of the answers to that would be yes. And I would say that, and I've challenged banks over this as well, we sit in the middle as a technology provider for both banks and corporates. There's an interesting connectivity and solution conundrum here now as to, it's not necessarily who's responsible for the fact that it's suboptimal, but it is interesting now who's going to solve that, who's going to pay for it, you know, in terms of fixing those addressable gaps, and also fixing, and I've talked about this before, Peter, you know that, I think the biggest innovation Treasury can make is to fix those gaps.
Interesting. I'm led to the thought, listening to you there, that it's going to be quite difficult for treasurers, particularly to take both the points that Agnes and Katherine made, to try and translate that to language that their executive management is going to understand, their peer group, particularly within their organizations, is going to understand. I don't think this is an external stakeholders issue. I'm not going to go there. What advice perhaps might you give to a treasurer saying, well, okay, Bill, that's fine, but I'm here today, I've got all this jumble of stuff. How do I look at this problem? To take Katherine's point, which end of the spectrum, or near to which end of the spectrum should I start?
Yeah, I mean, again, that's a great question. And you look at the problems that exist like that in terms of enterprise-wide connectivity, file format dependency with one or more or multiple banks, multiple payment systems potentially, and tokenized entry through all of them rather than single sign-on, for example. Multi-bank reporting, you know, MT940s from SWIFT aren't even a common standard. So consolidating all of that information, either end of day or even the thought of real time, and then the ability to reconcile that and produce my true working balance versus what I'm seeing in the banks, you know, my projected everything. All of those represent challenges, and I believe that the technological capability to be able to solve those challenges absolutely exists, not necessarily within the existing infrastructure of what a treasury has, you know, in terms of the TMS and the ERP system, for example, because if it did, then it would be working like that. My advice, and I've said this a number of times and I put it into a number of articles recently during this crisis, is it is a connectivity problem. It is a solution problem. There's a multitude of fintechs that will say they can do these kind of things. Your point is an absolutely valid one. If Treasury wants to take this internally and up through the company, it has to be the right technology solution. It has to be the right fintech. And fundamentally, absolutely critically, they've got to understand the business.
I've got a couple of questions that have come in here that I want to pick up on you with, and then there's one or two that I want to pick up with Katherine and Agnes, but just certainly for you. First one would be, is the crisis the end of non-cloud-based technology applications? Will the crisis stimulate acceleration in Treasury tech innovation? Just before you answer that, I'd like to draw people's attention to, there's a couple of very good questions in our Business of Treasury research, which people should go and look up, about what people think good and bad Treasury looks like, and also where they think they're going to be investing. And it's quite interesting that specific context of investing in AI and machine learning isn't yet as far up the agenda as one might have thought it. because it's still being partly included in the bigger package picture of TMS. So where do you think they are? Is cloud-based on the way out, and will the crisis stimulate Treasury tech innovation?
It's for me, Peter, initially, is it?
Yes, please, Bill. Yeah.
Yeah, so I firmly believe that it will spell cloud technology is very much at the forefront right now and will continue to be so. I don't think bespoke software residing internally within Treasury or anywhere is a supportable solution like that going forward. I also think that the technology and the need for better technology and integrated technology to solve, like I said, the being remote like this now, probably, and I mean, I'm not a practitioner per se like Katherine and Agnes, but for me, it will draw attention to what's missing in my Treasury at the moment, fundamentally, that liquidity or intraday positions, that my payments are predicated on intraday banking limits, and do we have contingency and backup, which again comes back to this cash management resilience piece that I was talking about. I think,
and presumably you'd extend that up the chain to the risk management issues you were talking about as well.
I would 100%, and I think coming back to being proactive or reactive, that's very much fundamentally down to the quality of the solution and the technology. I mean, I can't stress it enough.
Thanks very much for the moment, Bill. One of the questions that's come up, I want to address in turn, Katherine and yes. Someone's asked, how important is the human element of BCP, which I presume to mean business continuity planning or processes? Have our plans focused enough on this, and how will technology help, if at all? There's been a number of questions, or excuse me, a couple of sessions during the course of the International Treasury Week that have addressed some of the leadership issues, some of the well-being issues as well. There's also some very interesting research in the business of Treasury that I'd recommend people to go and look. But Agnes, perhaps you first. How important is that human element? You mentioned some of that already. Do you think it's done enough for you and your team?
Yeah. Interesting. I was on a pre-recorded session that was talking about this kind of topic earlier this week, actually. So, yeah, I think it has. I think on the human side, it is definitely a challenge. Because I think all of us probably suffer from cabin fever, from just not knowing when the day starts and ends, especially in Treasury, where, certainly at the very start of the crisis, it was all hands on deck because you're trying to figure out, if you have any funding issues or anything like that. So not only you need to carry on with BAU, but then additionally you need to do all of the contingency planning and all of that. So it has been a challenge for sure. Personally, there was probably a month where I think I was working nonstop. What's really important is to make sure we stay connected with our teams and our kind of broader kind of finance stakeholders, etc. I do quite a lot of that. Sage as a company does quite a lot of that, and we were doing that before the crisis anyway. So in a way, I'm quite fortunate to be in a company that actually is very aware of how it treats his employees and colleagues and how we all interact together. So we've got loads of, they call that all hands meetings, but, meetings or live events exactly like now, where we've got the CEO and the CFO addressing us, or the MD for a certain business, or just the Treasury team, or just the finance team, or whatever. So we've got loads of those, and quizzes and drinks and all sorts of stuff. So but it makes a massive difference. So I hope that most companies are aware of that. It's hard for me to comment because I'm in a company that actually is very good at it, but yeah, well, I would hope it. I mean, it's one of the obvious things that we know we all have to do to make sure we stay happy, or as happy as we can, working from home really, and being isolated.
Yeah, well, that's useful advice anyway. Katherine, you're slightly different position. You haven't met any of your colleagues. You've had to do this all, so to speak, from remote scratch. you are trying to bring together perhaps some different scales and types of systems or lack thereof, perhaps, that you might have in organizations. Do you see business continuity planning in that context as we'll make the best of what we got and then look back at the lessons? Or are you thinking actively now, if I had to do this again, I'd obviously want to start in a different place, but these are the building blocks of where I'd start again?
Yeah, I mean, I think thinking about the question that you were asked about the human element of business continuity planning, and in the context that I'm in, I mean, like Agnes, I think the AA is really excellent about the way it's managed its communications and some of the sort of mental health and emotional health support that's been offered, and lots of things that I think have been discussed in online sessions about being sensitive to the individual circumstances of the people that you're dealing with, and having online coffee sessions or chat sessions, places that people can go. All of that I think is really important. I think it's probably worth taking a moment just to recognize as treasurers that in those companies that are under particular pressure at the moment, the treasurers may be feeling the pressure more intently than, or at least as intently as anyone else in the business, including probably the CEO. So, and treasuries are, typically relatively small teams within their companies. Some treasurers have maybe been sitting on plenty of cash that's all of a sudden disappeared, and suddenly there's lots and lots of attention. So as well as dealing with all of the, how do you do your homeschooling, and how do I get, make sure that my elderly parents have got their shopping and all of that you're also dealing with, actually everyone's looking to me to advise on how we get out of this mess. And I've also got this connectivity thing that I probably really should have looked at already and haven't. And all of that leads to a huge amount of pressure on the treasurer. And I think we perhaps need to recognise in ourselves that you can feel like you take all of it on your shoulders, when it's a wider business issue. And we have to kind of cut ourselves a break for that and recognise where we're at. I think in the context of what I'm doing in the AA at the moment, there's probably you have to adjust what you can and can't do for the situation that you're in. So certainly there are some opportunities for me to pick up some pieces that perhaps haven't been, without having had a group treasurer in role for a number of years, I've been able to pick up banking relationships and conversations very easily. Now, I don't want to look at maybe some of the operational stuff and the people set up while everyone's dispersed and working from home and trying to make the best of things. So I think we have to recognise what we can and can't do in the situation. And I think we also have to recognise that that as treasurers, we're not responsible if our business is under a lot of pressure. There's a lot we can do to help lead out of that and manage that situation, and we'll be really key critical people in this circumstance. But if the business is under pressure, it's not the treasurer's fault.
That's some wise words there. I'd just like to bring up the second polling question, if I might, which is another sort of continuum question. Post the crisis, which we all hope will come fairly swiftly, will treasurers prioritise resilience over efficiency, balance resilience with efficiency, or prioritise efficiency over resilience? You can obviously interpret these in any of the ways that you want, but I'd be interested to see what the responses are. There is, and we haven't touched upon it, has been quite a lot of debate in the last year, 2 or 3, particularly in the UK, on measurements of productivity. And I wonder whether some of those will start to not go away per se, but to be balanced with issues of resilience, efficiency, the human element of management and mental well-being that comes into some of those, and that we might start to look at what work is in some slightly different ways. So perhaps if people would have a go at the live poll before we finish up. While we're waiting for some of the one or two of those answers to come in, Bill, I'd just like to come back to you briefly. It's a difficult question, which is why I'm going to ask it to you. It asks about what happens in circumstances in which Treasury or treasurers or businesses have little or no Treasury infrastructure in place. Where should they start? It's a bit of a chicken and egg question, and I know it's slightly unfair, but your experience over many years, what does that tell you about how at least people should think about and what questions they should ask, for example, of folks like yourselves who are service providers?
Yeah, thanks for that one. Catherine made some really good points as well about whilst it's not Treasury's responsibility per se, that the current crisis, certainly from a cash and risk and working capital perspective, illuminates Treasury in a way that it probably never has before. I made the point earlier that assuming somebody from a start base in terms of that question has the budget and the capacity to go out and buy an enterprise accounting system, buy a TMS, and look to connect up all their banks, and that's fine, but there's a lot of people that have done all of that and are now working remotely from home and still can't see all their bank balances, see it all in a timely manner, other than getting it out on a convoluted spreadsheet or in some way like that, are reliant upon proprietary bank formats in one or more cases to facilitate their payments, which is also a mission critical dependency that perhaps gets forgotten, but in a crisis like this should be looked at. In answer to that question as well, and it's often a one that I hear, is one of like, well, I need to get a TMS. And that's another interesting debate, because the forefront of what you need from a Treasury point of view, by definition, would be a CMS, a cash management system, to be able to do all of the things that I've said are highlighted and illuminated as the problems at the moment. A TMS, and I've sold them, so I get it by all means. If you're looking at 5-year, 10-year forecasts and different yield curve assumptions, and you have structured debt profiles and the swap programs, etc., then you do need a TMS. That doesn't mean it's going to integrate with your 200 banks and the accounts you don't know about worldwide and provide you with that current intraday cash management view. So, you know, my advice is that the technology is definitely there. The expertise, if you look for it, is also there, and the support is there as well. And my advice, and I said it earlier, is don't start at, you've said it before in terms of the cart and the horse, don't start at the back end of this and work your way through until you finally get to the cash management and find, oh, it doesn't all bolt together very well, because historically that's the way it's tended to have been done. And I'm saying this over, I was selling global cash management in the 90s and to US multinationals and corporate treasuries, and it was always that kind of approach.
Yeah, I heard some very good, I think someone said on one of the sessions, I can't remember which one it was earlier this week, someone said in simple terms, start with the things that are really, really going to hurt the organization, and then work your way down to the things in terms of the lesser hurt. I mean, it's a risk register in many ways, but now I think it needs to include, as both Agnes and Catherine have said, it needs to include human element, it needs to include well-being and some of those other issues that come with that, and hurt in a broad variety of ways, not solely financial, although clearly that goes to the heart of the Treasurer's traditional stewardship of the value and protecting the value of an organization. And we've got some results come up here, and very firmly in negative order, so to speak. Very few people are probably going to prioritize efficiency over resilience. That's rather suggests to me that we'd rather be here tomorrow with all our faults than be really good and not and go out of business at the end of today. as we draw the conversation to a close, I just want to pick up on one other point, and perhaps with Katherine and Agnes as well. As you look forward and you consider what your next steps are likely to be, what do you think are the 2 or 3 things in terms of how you control the technology within your Treasury function? What are the 2 or 3 that you think are going to be front of mind for you? I don't mind, Katherine or Agnes, either. Katherine, perhaps.
It's a big question, especially since I've only been in post for a month.
And you've only got 2 minutes.
Yeah. Okay, well, I'll do it quickly and then hand over to Agnes, who'll probably give a much better answer. But you know, I think there are clearly opportunities, and I think you know, I'm lucky enough to be in a business that has pretty solid underlying business to it, even hit by the virus. I have some thoughts about the opportunities. I mean, the AA has talked about, and the CEO has talked about, perhaps one of the next stages of development in the company is going to be looking at cost to serve. And having gone through that process in Centrica, I have a bit of experience to bring to that, both in terms of how that works within Treasury and in the wider context of an organisation looking to go through quite significant change. So for me, it will be putting those priorities in order. We also have we're very indebted at the AA, so that managing the debt and the financing is going to be my first order of priority, which isn't to say that you know, that other stuff matters less, as you know, might be indicated by your poll. I think you do need to keep both in mind as you work through this period.
Sure. Agnes, very briefly, if I may press you.
Yes. So I think to your question, to Bill, about where do we start, I think the crisis is actually, I see it as a positive. It has been excellent showing us where the priorities are and what actually matters to management, what matters to the treasurer. And so I think that's where certainly I am looking at. And for us, cash is quite important, and not just from the cash management point of view in Treasury, but the end-to-end kind of cash process. How do we collect it? How do we concentrate it? How do we spend it, etc.? And that was prior to the crisis, but the crisis has showed us that is even more important to get it right. So I think all of the investment that we'll have in the short term will be on that, because it's just been highlighted by the crisis, you know, reconfirmed that it's very important for us. But I think the crisis is good in terms of showing us what we can look at and what we should be focusing on and what's important.
Okay, thank you very much for that. So I'm going to draw the session to a close, and I'd like to thank Agnes, Katherine and Bill for their contributions. I'd like to thank all of you who have been live with us today, or will be listening to us over the next month or so. Just a very brief reminder, you should get your email from the ACT telling you where you'll be able to find all the sessions that you've either heard and want to listen to again, or haven't heard and want to listen to this week. I'd remind you to keep a very good close eye on the ACT website, of course, for all C19 related Treasury ideas and thoughts and comments. There are some daily blogs being written. The Business of Treasury research is available. There's plenty for everybody to keep themselves busy and active on top of the day job, as always. So just remains for me to thank everybody for participating, to thank you, the audience, for being there, and look forward to speaking with everybody very soon. Please take care. Thank you very much.